coming. This will be a good program, and I think we'll all learn something. And so I want to make sure that we have enough time to get it all done. You've got a program, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I'll pick one up. The first item on today's agenda is a tribute to Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington, who happen to be here tonight. We've got Roger Rossman, it's over there on the left. He's an associate professor at COA. We've got Michael Bontour from Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. And they are prepared to introduce you to Mr. Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Hi, you guys. My name is Mike Montour, member of the Epsilon Chi Lambda chapter at Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated, right here in Elizabeth City. So, to get into this monologue, I would like to start off with a poem I wrote. It's called Facts, and since it is Black History Month, I thought I should state some facts. So here it goes. Sunsets and sunrises of pain for centuries is what my people see. Broken spirits followed by broken bones. We were packaged and shipped like animals to a hell of a home. Taken out of our comfort zone. We were traded like cards you collect for the next man to neglect and show even less respect. I mean, we were placed in heat stress, harvesting crops that we couldn't even use to put a shirt on our back. Now, it might be off track, but really was spot on, because holding shirts from webs on our back became life's uniform. Well, speaking your mind or reading books will get you hung like charms. I think it's time to ring the alarm. See, it's a new day, but we're still on the same trip. All it would take is for us two to stand up, and we can make this whole world shift. And that's facts.
Good evening, Mr. Washington. My name is Julius Rosenwald, and my friend Henry Goldman from Goldman Sachs wanted us to meet.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Rosenwald. Mr. Goldman and I were at a luncheon that President Roosevelt held at the White House. We were discussing the plight of the Negro in the United States. Your name came up in many discussions that we were having, so I'm finally glad to meet you.
Yes, well, Henry thought that you and I would find common ground if we met, and I must agree, he was correct. Especially now that I understand how the Negro people have suffered from the same prejudice and discrimination that my people, the Jewish people, have suffered for so many centuries. And for that reason, I would like to help the Negro community the same way that I help the Jewish community.
Well, that's great. As the leading voice for former slaves and their descendants, I would like our people, the Negro people, to focus on economic growth and education. We have children in the South that are suffering from inadequate books as well as inadequate schooling.
I understand your plight. And I think I could do something about that. I could provide some funds to create 6 small schools in rural Alabama. I only ask that these schools be designed by Tuskegee Institute staff.
That's great. As a matter of fact, the faculty and I have already been discussing building schools for young Black children. The blueprints will be done in a couple of months, I believe. To boost economic growth, we can have Black men in our communities help build them.
Excellent. 6 years go by. Booker, it has been a pleasure to work with you for the last 6 years. Watching these 6 schools be built and staffed and the communities that have built up around them, I've decided to establish the Rosenwald Fund. The monies from this fund will go to helping to educate the Negro children in the rural South, as well as other states in the Union. I only ask that the monies for this fund be tied to matching grants, and that the white school boards commit to maintaining those buildings, and that Black members in the societies that they're growing up in are paid to aid in the construction.
That's great. Julius here was the president of Sears and Roebuck Company and funded the construction of more than 4,977 schools for African Americans in the United States, of which he also helped me with the construction of more than 813 schools here in North Carolina. There were several schools even right here in Elizabeth City, North Carolina.
Now we're going to get started, okay? So the prayer, Dr. Richard Boone.
Holy Father, we are gathered here today for one single purpose, to give you honor. And then, Lord, we ask that you will be here with us, because you said in your word, where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, you will be there also. The song says, lift up your voice and sing. Your word says, praise the Lord at all times. Thank you, Lord, for being here. Continue to guide, protect, and lead us always. Amen.
Amen. Good evening, everyone. I have the privilege tonight to introduce tonight's speaker. Melissa Stuckey is Assistant Professor of African American History at the illustrious ECSU. She earned her bachelor's degree from Princeton University and her PhD from Yale University. She's a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority.
Yes.
She's currently reading her first book entitled All Men Up, Race, Rights, and Power in the All-Black Town of Boley, Oklahoma, 1903 to 1939, which unveils the Black freedom struggle in Oklahoma as it took shape in the state's more than 24 all-Black towns. She volunteers with a nonprofit organization in Oklahoma committed to helping these towns survive in the 21st century. Dr. Stuckey is an author of several magazine and journal articles and a recipient of awards including the American Philosophical Society's John Hope Franklin Award. In addition to her leading role in rehabilitating ECSU's Rosenwald School and Principal's House to create a research center, Stuckey serves as a researcher and writer for the Beaufort County, South Carolina Low Country Reconstruction and History Center project, which in partnership with the National Park Service will interpret the history of Reconstruction for the national and international audience. On those rare occasions when Dr. Stuckey is not working, she enjoys spending time with her nieces, and when it's not too humid out, getting outside and walking. Without further ado, I present to you Dr. Melissa Stuckey.
As you can see, the title of it is the Northeastern North Carolina African American Research and Cultural Heritage Center. It is a long name that I did not make up myself. One of my colleagues at ECSU came up with that. And it is always subject to change because one of the responsibilities that I have as someone who wrote and was successful in winning a certain grant that I'll speak about in a minute is to fundraise. So I'm moving into the position of being a historian and a history professor and someone who likes to research and write and be in the library all the time, to someone who gets the opportunity to reach out and to make the work that I do connect, right? So for me, this research center, we'll talk about it in terms of buildings, but it really is about people. It's about connecting ECSU with the community that we serve and creating a space to tell stories, to share stories, to archive stories. And those stories, the people who tell them, the materials that you have, your memories, your experiences, those are the things that make this a research center. So even before the research center itself is physically open, it exists because it is you, right? And that's really important for me to preface that with. How many of you attended a Rosenwald school that you know is a Rosenwald school? Wonderful, that is fantastic. I suspect that there are more people in this room who have attended Rosenwald schools who don't know it. As I started to do the work of putting this project together, there are so many people on campus that are part of that and touch hands and see the application from administrative assistants all the way through the chancellor's office. And one of my departmental administrative assistants, as she's looking at the paperwork and helping me to process it, says to me, well, I didn't attend Rosenwald School. And I just looked at her and I was like, I bet you did, right? So we went through the list. I started to accumulate this list because there are so many in our region. and you found the school, right? So it's very likely that even if you are not aware of the school's history or beginnings as a Rosenwald school, that it is indeed one of those many Rosenwald schools. So to begin with, ECSU has a historic district, the Elizabeth City State Teachers College Historic District. And am I speaking loud enough, by the way, folks in the back?
Yeah,
great. Thank you. Within that historic district, there are several assets. One of them, or two of them, being this Rosenwald School building, which was built in 1921, and what we call the Principal's House, which has been the home of ECSU leadership from 1923, when we had a principal all the way through some of our chancellors from the 1990s. In the early 1990s, it ceased to be a functional home and moved on to be office space. Similarly, the Rosenwald School has had a long history. It was actually only, this particular building was only used as a classroom space for a relatively short amount of time, given the kinds of Rosenwald School longevity there are in the other parts of the region. A larger one was built across the street. So, but this one was the original. It's a 3-teacher schoolhouse, and it was used as what we called a practice school, or a model school, or a training school. As you all know, Elizabeth City State began its life as a normal school, right? So it was a teaching institution designed to train young folk to go out and be teachers, right? They needed, just like they need today, they needed to practice their craft, and that is what that schoolhouse represents, is young African-American children in the Elizabeth City community getting primary school education at the hands of, or at the leadership of young student teachers and their supervisors, their teaching professors. So that is the sort of the short story of this Rosenwald School. I really, really appreciated the dramatization for so many reasons. One of them is, the next slide I won't have to do too much about, right? You guys, that's awesome. But part of what I appreciated about it as well was one of the quiz questions was, what else did these schools, what were they used for? These spaces were designed to be incredibly flexible. So there are moving doors. We can make a classroom, room like this. We can make it into 2 rooms for classes, open it up to have a meeting like this. So they were used day, they were used evening classes, community meetings, sewing classes, all kinds of things that were valuable to people. Elizabeth City, and I'm not someone who, you've heard that my research is in Oklahoma, so I don't specifically do research on the Rosenwald School. So I bet there are things that you guys will share with me that you know more. But one of the things I do know is that Elizabeth City they were not quick to fund public schools because we have this one on campus, right? So there was a point where this school is overcrowded and it's not really being used for its purpose. And that's why we end up with a larger Rosenwald School facility across the street. So I just wanted to note that, is that there was a time when this was the primary vehicle for primary education in Elizabeth City, but that was not really supposed to be its purpose. Its purpose was to be a training school for these teachers to be. It's quite rare, actually, to have a Rosenwald School on a college campus. So we have intact a real jewel in that respect in northeastern North Carolina, in this region. I've been able to identify nationally in the 15 states that there were Rosenwald schools, about 3 others. So this is something that's quite special. And again, because it's on a college campus rather than being in a local community, even though we outgrew this space, this remained valuable property and usable property. So it's had multiple lives, right? At one point, it was the school laundry. I think, do any of you remember going and dropping off sheets and things at this building. So at some point it was the school laundry. At another point, very briefly, it was a beauty school. That experiment failed in terms of the direction of the university. And then most recently, it is housed was office space for several different kinds of things. And up until last summer, it was full of old computer equipment and all kinds of other stuff. So they had electricity. They've got roofs that are in relatively good condition, et cetera. And that makes them really valuable in terms of thinking about Rosenwald schools. So that's where we are. These are our assets. And you guys can tell me now the history of the relationship between Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald. There are a few things that I would add to the story that I think are interesting. One is that these plans that the faculty at Tuskegee came up with were actually open to everybody. They were available to everyone. So it's entirely possible that you will see a little old schoolhouse that maybe used to be wide and now is kind of peeling into decay. That was not a Rosenwald school officially, but was built with Rosenwald school plans. So this is a kind of a prototypical schoolhouse, right? There were plans for one school or one teacher schools all the way through up to 10 teacher schools and high schools. So there were different plans. They were open to anyone. They were free, and they were created in the early 20th century at the height, and they were really sort of the height of what the standard was for public school education and school construction. So really big windows that let in light. They had very specific rules about how they were placed to maximize light. So if the land is east-west facing, the school has to be a certain way, or north-south facing, the school has to be a certain way, and use certain plans to maximize the light. So that was really important. They had heat. Another important fact is that in addition to this community buy-in, right? So not just African-American community or Julius Rosenwald, but also the school boards, which were largely controlled by white people. In addition to that, the school boards were also required to pay the teachers. So the teachers had to have a decent wage, a living wage, and that was another requirement. So when I think about the project that we're working on at UCSU to rehabilitate these two buildings and to use them to create a research center and a cultural heritage center, we are really embodying a lot of the principles that created and made possible Rosenwald schools across the American South. So I need to skip this one, but this is obviously Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington. This map gives you a sense of the density where these Rosenwald schools are. North Carolina is, well, Virginia is the northernmost there, Virginia and Maryland, and you can kind of see where North Carolina is. This region, what's really important about this map though, is that really, really large, dense black space, that's here. That's here. We have more Rosenwald schools here than anywhere else in our state. I just moved to Elizabeth City in 2017, but when I learned that, as a historian who's always thinking about what's important, right? We have to figure out what's important, what's the important story. I'm at ECSU, the former normal school, right? Supposed to train young African-American men and women to teach. And we've got this region, our region, where there are more Rosenwald schools than anywhere else in the state. Where are our teachers going? Where are ECSU's graduates going? They're populating these Rosenwald schools. And, as a newcomer, there are things that kind of fall into the background when maybe you've been here for a long time that are in sharp relief for me. The slog, the drive from here to Durham, from here to Raleigh, that stood out to me. The fact that we don't have a facility to really study, to house, to archive, to store the history of this region, in this region, stands out to me. We have here an incredible opportunity to take advantage of the resources that are inherent in who we are as a region. It's our responsibility, but it's also our privilege to create a space where we can save the stories, we can find the stories, we can create the archive that allows folk like me, when I get to be a historian, to go and to do research and to tell our stories. I write about all Black towns in Oklahoma when I am a professor or when I am a historian of my own. But what I learned from doing that is to really appreciate and deeply value the importance of stories in rural spaces. History doesn't just happen in the big cities. The important stories happen on dirt roads. They happen in those one-room homes without bathrooms. Those stories matter. So yes, newcomer, but when I started to put the pieces together, I knew that I was supposed to be here, right? This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I want you guys to be a part of that, right? That density, that importance, the gravity, the urgency. This is urgent. We have to be able to get out there, record stories, find that old classic picture that grandma's got in her photo album. Our goal with the Research Center is to digitize those things. So our goal isn't to take, right? And that can often be a sort of a sticky point between archives and individuals, right? Where our goal isn't to take, our goal is to help to preserve. So we want to have things like history harvests. Maybe we can even have them at the library in addition to on campus, where you can come in and have a conversation about your picture or that diploma, or record that story. And then we would be able to, if you want to give it to us, that's great. But the other thing is we can give you that acid-free folder that will help to protect that item so that it doesn't decay, so it doesn't crumble or fall apart. To urge you not to, there are certain things that we kind of think are great to protect objects that aren't. I'm trying to think of, what is it, where you put the plastic coating on the back and front. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's in 40 years it won't exist anymore. So to have conversations just like that. And in addition to me on campus, we have a new archivist. So he's someone who's been trained in how to protect things, right? So we want to be able to have those conversations and bring people back to campus. Come back to ECSU. Bring your grandkids. We want to have a space within our Rosenwald school that is a bit of a replica classroom. We'll also have displays of some of these objects or replications of them, and also have some digital archival space. I wanted to just sort of list a few of the more local Rosenwald schools. In addition to the practice school and the city school, there's a school in Salem Township, which I don't even, who knows where Salem Township is around here? Salem, does that sound familiar? Is it part of the city? It's in Weeksville. Oh, that makes much more sense. So yeah, so there was a school called the Winslow School, and then two in Camden, Belcross and South Mills. And just to let you know, if you're curious, the sources that I'm using to identify schools as I go across the region, the Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee has a collection of the Rosenwald School papers, and within that collection they've created a database where you can simply type in your county and your state and get a list of the Rosenwald schools that we're in. So that's where I'm getting this information from. Our Rosenwald school, which you've seen an image of already, was originally right next door to the principal's house. And in 1953, it was moved to another place on campus, and I'm going to wrap up soon. I think I just got the wrap up cough.
No, no.
Oh. But definitely, there is a wrap up cough. It was moved to another location on campus. Our goal, and this is what you have all at your chairs, is to bring our Rosenwald School back home to its original location. It was originally right next door to the principal's house in a space that is now a parking lot. In order to move it, we're required to do an archaeological dig. That is the most exciting thing that I've ever contemplated participating in. Why? Because so much of what African American history is, especially for the kind of work that I do and the kinds of stuff that I study, we're not going to always find those stories already neat in an archive, right? So part of what we're talking about now is creating an archive. What do you think you're going to find when you start to dig beneath where the school used to be? Buttons, tablets, chalkboard tablets, doll heads. Right, right. The archive in so many of our places is underground. So many of our places. So what a privilege to be able to try to spearhead an opportunity to not only bring the Rosenwald School back to its original location, but also to create opportunities for all of us to experience the excitement, and also with a community college. So we're looking really, like, this is really all about community partnership and you know, to create this thing. This is ours, and that's really important. So I've talked a lot about this, so I won't do this stuff. Okay? This is what we're trying to do. We've got these Rosenwald schools. There's more than 200 in this region alone out of the 800 across the state. We want it to be a community space, a gathering space. It also, you know, there are some heads that this is really important to think about. This is a space that can draw folk from away from here, right? So it's something that can boost tourism. I want to see school trips. I want to see third graders sitting in a desk like their great grandma would have sat in. That's what that's my vision. So that's the kind of thing that this, and importantly, I want to create a space that allows us to have conversations about the region, from the Great Dismal Swamp to the Freedmen's villages along the coast. Part of my intro, the fact that I work on, was mentioned, or that I work on a project in Beaufort, South Carolina, which is what we call it down there, in Beaufort, South Carolina, about Reconstruction. I started working on that project before I took the position at UCSU, but again, I was supposed to be here because the reason why Reconstruction took place in Beaufort, South Carolina is the same reason why there are Freedmen villages like James City, like Freedmen Village in the Outer Banks, is because of the same Civil War story about a Union Navy, a Union naval blockade, African American soldiers. That story is part of Elizabeth City as well. We're part of that. So for me, to be able to think about what we're starting in Beaufort and how we grow that, right? We grow that right up the coast all the way up to Fort Monroe. That is freedom, right? We get to tell those freedom stories and be a place where those freedom stories can be told. So this research center has to happen, right? And towards it having to happen, what have we done? We've done a lot of things. Things happened before I was here, starting in fall 2016, when folks on campus started to think, what are we going to do with these buildings? And how do we engage our local community with that? I joined the team in fall 2017, and I got to be honest, the fall part, I don't know what's going on, right? I've literally just parked my things in my apartment, and now I'm on campus trying to teach, trying to learn everything, and tagging along with folk as we're having meetings. Some of those meetings were with the Historic Preservation Program in Edgecombe Community College, where we had some students there come in and do a survey of the building and issue a report. Some of those meetings were with the State Historic Preservation Office and then also with HistoriCorps, which is a nonprofit organization that uses volunteer labor to rehabilitate historic buildings. They are based out west, but they have established recently a second area in Virginia, home base in Virginia, and they are so excited to work with us. Like, this is a huge project for them. A lot of the projects they do are either private homes or they work a lot with the federal government. So this is their they did a building in at Virginia State. So this would be their second university collaborative project. And just incredible in terms of they also surveyed the building. And all of these things really help to build us towards, so this is a little bit about HistoriCorps and Edgecombe. But all of these things really help to build us towards January of 2019, where I get an email and several other faculty and staff on campus get an email that we are summoned to a meeting and a grant application is placed in front of us, and the folks at the table are responsible for deciding what it is that we are sort of being voluntold to apply for, right? And the funny thing is the room that we were in has a window that basically frames this Rosenwald School, right? Like, if you're sitting on one part of the table, you look out the window, there's the school. I'm not a fan of reinventing the wheel. As I noted, all of these things happened largely before I came here. Why don't we apply to do something with that school? In those conversations, which lasted a good half of the semester, we came up with this concept of bringing together the Rosenwald School and the principal's house, moving that Rosenwald School, and creating this center out of those two buildings right next to each other. So that was it, right? And all the things that I talked about in terms of the gravity, the importance historically for our region of having this number of schools, having this institution that was created to educate and train young teachers to be able to go out and teach in those schools. The story for me as a writer, as a historian, was there, right? I just kind of took it and wrote it. And as I mentioned, one of my friends, John Rayner, who's in the back, he works on campus in an office that called Sponsor Programs that's required to help us get these applications out. So spring break, which I didn't do, 5 o'clock when it was due, I hadn't showered, I had slept days, right? We got it done. We got this application out. Now, I'm someone who, I should say that the grant that we applied for, it's called the National Endowment for the Humanities Grant. It was a brand new grant last year and it's called Infrastructure and Capacity Building. It's specifically designed to aid in rehabilitating structures like ours and helping them to become something new, right? And like I said, so I've been working this all semester. Spring break, we got it done. Then I went to sleep. My intention, just getting it done was a really big accomplishment, right? This is a team, and I'll be able to show you some of the members of the team at the end. But this is a team effort. But at the end of the day, no one should expect to win a National Endowment for the Humanities grant their first time. Nobody. There are people who have applied 8 times and finally, some of my friends, right, and they finally got it. So my plan, because I'm super arrogant, I guess, was not to win this year, but to get really good feedback, fix some things that I identified that I wasn't satisfied with the grant, and reapply. Having had an extra year of time to fundraise, an extra year of time to have conversations like this one, an extra year to just make it better. And I remember especially being obsessed with the idea that we didn't get the required page numbers. We just didn't have time to fix the page number situation. So for months and months, I'm just making page numbers and having conversations, and I'm starting to do that with folk on campus. And I went home to South Carolina in the summer, and I was driving back to Elizabeth City in a huge rainstorm. Was it August 15th? It was around then, where we got this email, and they sent it to me, they sent it to JT in his office and a few other people. And I said to myself when I saw who sent it, it's cool, whatever it says is fine. You got this plan, it's a year plan, you're fine, whatever it says. I pulled over to read it, because even though I'm saying it's cool, it's fine, I need to pull over to read this in the rain. How is it that we won $350,000?
Who did?
The first time. So, it's stunning.
Did you scream?
I was too busy one finger texting people, and he's texting me. So I call my mama. That's what. That's always my first phone call is to my mother. And I might have let out a few yelps, right? For sure. I was at a gas station. It was flooding. It was really nightmarish weather in Florence. I hadn't gotten far. I got as far as Florence, South Carolina, and it was incredible. It's incredible. But with great, efforts, we won this thing. But what it does now is it puts a real responsibility and opportunity on our shoulders, right? So I mentioned that we understand the mutuality, how Rosenwald schools were established. It's the same with the grant. It is a matching grant.
Oh, no.
Okay? You know what I'm saying, right? It is a matching grant. So it's a dollar for dollar matching grant. They have a special category for certain kinds of institutions, including HBCUs, that make it a dollar for dollar matching grant. At big giant institutions like Chapel Hill, for example, it's 3 to 1. So we're actually not bad in terms of the responsibility and the weight of that. It's appropriate, I think, to our capacities in terms of staffing and numbers, et cetera. So we have a dollar for dollar match responsibility, which is spread out over 6 years. So I'm learning to become many things all at once, which is to say something of an expert on the Rosenwald School story, continuing to do my own research in Oklahoma, teaching, and also now wannabe center director and absolutely fundraiser. So I've made sure that everyone has a copy of the flyer that has the image of the institute or of our baby there and information about how to donate. What I love about, from my perspective, there's this weight of responsibility of raising $350,000 over the next 6 years. But there are things that I want to share about that from the perspective, hopefully, of you guys sitting here. I love matching grants when people ask me for money. I get 10 and it meets 20. Actually, really, really get excited about that because I feel like I'm getting more value for my dollar. So that's one way to look at it. And then the other thing is that the StoreCorps, because they use volunteer labor, that labor has a value. So we do have some of the value, of that matching grant through the partnership. We do the work, we get the credit in terms of the match. So that's really important. And it's one of those things where anyone in this room can participate in that volunteer force. Even me, who would probably hammer her thumb. Anyone. So they do it on week-long models, but they're also willing to work with us to do special days. So we can all participate in doing some of that. Now, what kind of work does this school need done? They have a little water. Funny that, right? So, a rainy day in December, I got on my waterproof shoes and went out to the school to get some pictures of some of our water. Because this is an older building on campus and it's surrounded by some newer buildings, the priority in terms of landscaping and grading was to have water drain away from our newer dormitory. So this particular building, the Rosenwald School, kind of bore the unintended consequence of that being the place where the water's running towards, right? So we need to work on that, and that's something that we can start to work on campus. So there's some water pooling underneath the building, water by the AC unit between the building and the AC unit. There's water in that way, so that's something we need to work on. The other kinds of things that will be done in cooperation with Edgecombe Community College and Historic Corps are the kinds of things that we can do. We can spray paint. They will teach you everything you need to know about replacing boards. That porch right there, without that makeshift replacement, you would fall through it, right? So we can replace rotting boards, and they will show us how to do that. The stairs, we're pretty 100% sure that that is not the original, right? When we have historic pictures, I'm being a little facetious, but we have historic pictures, and we're pulling those things out of the archive to be able to juxtapose what did this place look like in 21. What does it look like now? So an example of that in this particular building that I don't have a picture of for you right now, although I have a bunch in the computer, are the windows. The windows are currently smaller than they were in 1921 or so. So we are going to have to source replacement windows that fill the entire space of the windows. So those are the kinds of projects that we'll be doing over the next few years with Historic Corps and Edgecombe. And here's just a few images of the principal's house and the kinds of work we'll be doing in there. This is old water damage, but now it needs to be, the damaged part needs to be fixed. So the roof is replaced and fixed, or the roof is fixed, but the damage was not repaired. So we'll be doing things like that within that space. It has been emptied out, so all of the office furniture is no longer there. We've got a blank canvas now to work with. And this is more of the, when I'm on campus and I'm talking to teachers and things about why everyone, including our aviation sciences folk, should be excited about this project, is that there are so many different ways that it can bring together the entire university community so that we can have classes that are completely designed around an element of historic preservation within the school. We can have videographers create projects that they can use to say, look, I can do a video project, and I also have a little bit of substance behind it. It's not a random story, but it's one that they can learn as they're going. So putting a history class together with a graphic arts class or a graphic design class or something like that. There are all kinds of opportunities for us to be really creative and to think out of the small boxes of what's your major, right, and to pull people together on campus. So the last slide is just largely a acknowledgement and thank you. This is a lot of the team who are actively working or had worked in years prior on this project. So as I mentioned, Dr. Charles Reed, who some of you may know, who's another history professor, all the way down to, there you are. I thought I had you on there. JT Rader, who's in sponsor programs and is in the back right there. So this is a growing list, right? This is a living list. It is not static, and I love those kinds of elements. How to give, because you want to give. So I want to say this. Before I went to Edenton, I emailed our folks in a university advancement, and they're responsible for the donating things. And I said, can I take checks? If people want to write checks, am I allowed to do that? Yes. So if you want to give today, as long as there's something that's documentable, I'm happy to do that. But these are the other ways to do it. We use an app called Mobile Cause, and that's the website for that. And then those are the instructions, so I'll keep those up. But yeah, that is the gist. That's a lot. And I assume that there's time. Is there time for questions? Or?
Please, questions.
Let's talk. So I'm happy to take any questions that we have. Yes?
Is there a map of where those schools were in Northeast North Carolina?
So there's that fuzzy map.
Specifically.
there's a mapping project. So that was something that's been with the state. Let me put it back on the final page and not do that. But that the state the State Historic Preservation Office has been working on. SHPO is creating, but it's one of those things where they want us to be like, oh, there's a Rosenwald school here. So active mapping project. It's probably not perfect. And one of the responsibilities, challenges, and opportunities that I have is to connect with folk all over the place who are shepherding the Rosenwald schools in their communities and identifying where those places are.
You know that there were 200 or more of those schools. You don't know their addresses then.
Some of them are identifiable. I use the FISC website, which I can happily show you guys. So rosenwaldschool.fisc.edu. The easiest way to use this is just put in your county. Some of that public money is certainly African American tax dollars, plus, right? So plus that $300 in cash, plus the church that donated their land, plus the labor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a big contribution there that is not necessarily visible in the $300. And then this, the $400 from the Rosenwald School Fund. So it could have an address, doesn't always. Yes.
There were approximately 14 schools in Pasquotank County, right here in this county, but there was only, I think, 2 of them were Rosenwald schools.
Right.
And also, it was P.W. Moore
Yes.
that lived in that house
Yes.
that you showed up there.
Yes.
And he was the person that was responsible for all the teaching during that particular time.
Yes.
Even those African-American children were required to go to school by law, but no money was provided.
Right.
So you have a lot of churches that built schools, Moses Temple out there, and Pitts Chapel out there that actually had a school,
Yes.
but they were not Rosenwald
That's
schools,
right.
and they were paid for by the church community.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I visited Edenton 2 Thursdays ago and got a chance to visit a school just like you're talking about. One of the people who was at the talk said, you know, our church had a school. You know, it definitely predates the Rosenwald schools, and it doesn't look like them in a lot of ways. The windows are more ornate. So you're 100% correct. And when I look at this research center, it is housed, yes, in this Rosenwald school, but it's about African American history in this region. It is about those schools as well. Those stories are as important in terms of thinking about how African Americans educated themselves and paid for that education and made it possible, right? So you're 100% correct.
There were no buses, no heat inside.
I've read the stories about, you know, the mud road, right?
I went to one, that's the reason
That's
why.
right. That's right. How was it when it rained?
Pardon me?
How was it when it rained?
Well, you walked. I walked 3 miles to school.
Uphill,
Each way.
both ways?
Each way, 6 miles per day, 30 miles a month.
Yeah.
I can calculate all of it.
Yes.
And the other thing that I think is so important for us to know in Pasquotank County, that Roanoke Institute was one of the places that was created during that particular era. But good.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to talk more. your stories, your story, your
Well,
memory.
I have
The fact
a
that
big
you were,
story.
Yes.
A real story.
yes, yes. I feel the weight. You know, I can calculate all those miles. You can feel them still. That matters. And those are the stories that we want. We want that story recorded. We want your kids to be able to read that, and your grandkids. We want that.
Will you eventually put markers at those schools located at the ends of Rosenwald School?
That is, wow, that's like a 20-year down the line. Yeah. Let's get this building done. What I like about the question, though, is that, you know, when I mentioned that there are kinds of projects that we can embed, that students can participate in, a marker project is a real, tangible project with a real, tangible result. And, you know, there's a great example. We just did one for PW Moore School, right? So, you know, from the research to the petitioning, filling out the paperwork, doing, that's something. That's a real thing that we could have a class do. Could they do all of them at once? No. But we could start, and that's what we should be doing. Absolutely.
Because for the most part, I think most of them were pretty much built alike.
Yes, they were very similar.
And those of us who are older kind of recognize those schools.
Yes.
But the ones who are really young would never know that it was a Rosenwald.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is, I say I'm from Sumner County. My parents are in a really small village called Redbert. And there's a road I drive down when I'm there. And there is a school that I'm sure is a Rosenwald school. And, you know, the cars are too fast. I can't stop and do what I want to do. You know, take pictures and walk around and probably do something for the snakes. But, like, that's where we are with a lot of our Rosenwald schools, right? Is that we need to find where they were if they're not standing anymore, or to make sure that what we do have is protected as much as it can be. And part of that is markers, part of that is public awareness, all of that kind of stuff. Yes.
One point that I wanted to make was that I used to meet with the offshoot of the commission that were in charge of founding all these schools in different counties. And people came from all of the different counties that had schools. They wanted me to do Pasquotank County, and I wanted to do Gates County.
Right.
My home.
There's a lot of schools in Gates County.
Yes, and so we knew where they were. We knew exactly how to put our hands on them, take pictures of them. You go outside, you'll see some pictures in the showcase. But one of the things that we did was we made certain that people understood that you could not restore these buildings with chicken dinners.
That's right.
So we said to the State Historic Preservation Commission, you need to allocate some money.
That's right.
Gates County got theirs done. Boom! Just like yours did. So it may mean that they want to do this. And I sent a letter the other day and I said to them, you need to do at least one per county. If we don't do anything else, at least one per county. I've taken pictures of all of those in Gates County, and there's one that's actually a legal residence school today.
Yeah.
And it is there because, for the most part, people understood what the state commission was.
Yes.
They want you to not change one single thing on the outside of that building.
Right.
It has to look exactly like it was.
Right.
But on the inside, you can do whatever you want to do.
Right.
Now, for your sake, you need to do the inside because you're going to be a research center.
Right.
You can't show research if you look like we just built it today.
Right.
But it was quite exciting, and I said, two I know, yours, your grant, and the one in Gates County went through just like that. And Wheel Paws is amazing. The Curra Peak is sitting right there. That one is sitting there right there, man, and it's full of bats. And we went in and we said, look, let's get the bats out and let's seal it up.
Yes.
Then I went to the church and I said, look, I'll pay you $5,000 for the building. And they were like, well, yeah, we want money.
Right.
But it costs you more than that to move the building.
That's right.
If anyone was paying attention the other night, over in Currituck, they had an article on the one that's the barbecue place. So you're going to be sitting there talking about rapper knuckles eating barbecue. But these are exciting things.
Yes.
They really move you. I've been inside most of them. And they are just like they were. Some of them still have chalkboards, everything.
Yes.
And it's exciting.
So when I visited this school, it was not a Rosenwald school, but when I visited the school that I visited in Edenton, I was able to understand this chalkboard thing, right? Because one of our report also says that they're probably still chalkboards. You know, the ceilings are tiled over and the walls are tiled over, but you start to peel back the layers and you start to see that original ceiling. The chalkboards were embedded into the walls. That's why we have our chalkboards. We can feel confident about that. They weren't things that you could put up and take down. When we peel those walls back, there's no reason why those chalkboards won't be there. So that's exciting. That was really personally very exciting for me. I want to go to Gates County and visit all the schools.
That's possible, sure.
So,
they'll even let you go into residential.
that would be wonderful. Yeah, so that, you know, again, my 2019 is about connecting, learning the region, and connecting with all of you as part of the region, beginning to jog those memories, bring them to the fore, because we're going to be doing oral history interviews, right? That's certainly something that we're going to be doing.
You know someone, I think I'm pretty sure I know someone that attended Rosenwald. My mother.
Yeah.
She was born in 1925. Do y'all have people that come out and interview? She's not able to come to go to y'all, but I'm sure if she's up to it, she would do that.
We want that. So, you know, we don't have a particular program set up right now. We've got me. We've got other people who are very skilled at oral history interviews. We've got folks who do cameras. In fact, a team from ECSU just went down to the state capitol at the History Museum and interviewed veterans of World War II and some Buffalo Soldier units. So, and we were able to pull that together in a week, which I was flabbergasted. So we've got all of the technical pieces, and yes. The answer is yes. I mean, it's partially we haven't organized that far yet, but the answer is yes. That's what this is all about, and the kinds of things we can do on campus. Yes, please do.
Dr. Stuckey, can you speak to the ongoing efforts that we have as far as pursuing other funding through grants like the National Park Service?
Yes.
And then also the other grants to collect oral histories outside of this project?
Yes. So I've discovered that I knew this before, but I didn't know how good I might be. I can win money, y'all. So when I was in graduate school, I applied for a bunch of grants that were just, you know, small-ish, right? That were for myself to be able to do research, $20,000, $10,000, that kind of thing. This was the biggest thing I've ever applied for until this fall, where I just applied for $500,000 from the National Park Service. So we got that one out, and we also applied for a $50,000 grant from another federal office that's for museum and library studies. And that particular one is really important for me because I'm someone who wants to get it right. And it's a planning grant, right? So we will have a plan, and part of that plan is having, it's community input, having community meetings, knowing what is needed and desired by the folk that, again, the people are the center, not the building, right? I live by that. So we'll find out, well, this government shutdown might slow us down a little bit. We'll find out sometime this spring the results of the Park Service grant. So this is not a fly-by-night. This is something that is it's long-term. And part of it, I believe in the idea of triage. What is vital? It's vital that we start this work before these buildings are rehabilitated, right? Time is our enemy. And you know what I mean. Time is not our friend here. So it's incumbent upon me to encourage our folk on campus to help us design an oral history project that allows us to do some of those stories, to do events on campus and other buildings, or here even, that allow folk to interact with their personal histories and think about where that fits in the larger stories. So I'm so thankful to be in front of all of you and to continue this work with all of you. Thank you.
Princeton and Yale, wasn't it? They play football?
They invented football.
Dr. Brown has something he wants to present.
Good evening. Good evening. What's the matter? Let's give a round. I attended another presentation by Dr. Glenn Bowman, who is working in conjunction with you on other this month doing Black History presentation. I want to tell you something. They're just doing a phenomenal program from ECSU. Let's give another round of applause for doing this. Because Black History Month is a month where we're supposed to not only attend programs, but to educate others about Black history. And I'm making a recommendation, and hopefully we can get it through, is that we stop celebrating Black history once a month and do it all the year. Not once a month and not all the year, because we have such a great history, and it's very seldom told. But Dr. Stuckey, you did a great job tonight. We appreciate you, we appreciate what ECSU is doing, and I think that it's just wonderful what you're doing. So on behalf of the library board, we present this to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All of you know Jackie King, and she hates to speak. And right now she's in fear that I'll say, Jackie, come on up here and say a few words. But Jackie does do a good job of keeping the library active and involved, and Black History Month wouldn't be the same in Elizabeth City without her. So. And her staff, as you can see, she gets them all involved, and I think they enjoy working with her. Thank you. And that concludes our prepared remarks. Have a good night.